He is worth an estimated $500 million. And if you met him at a hardware store, a gas station, or his own kid's soccer game, you would have absolutely no idea. Even the exact number is disputed, because the handful of forensic accountants who've tried to pin it down over the years can't agree with each other. And that disagreement is not an accident. It is the entire point of everything he built. Comment what you think his neighbors would guess he's worth. Most people who've met him land somewhere under $200,000, and he has spent 2 decades making sure they never find out how wrong that guess is. If you want to understand how a fortune this size gets built and then made to disappear completely, subscribe, because what follows are the 5 levels almost no self-made fortune ever makes it all the way through. Most people assume wealth eventually becomes visible: a bigger house, a newer truck, a name on a building somewhere downtown. For a small number of self-made millionaires and billionaires, the opposite happens. As the number grows, the visible signals shrink instead of expanding. Compensation stops arriving as a paycheck and starts arriving as trust distributions, dividends, and management fees routed through entities with names that mean nothing to anyone outside a filing cabinet. The house stops being owned by a person and starts being owned by an LLC that is owned by another LLC, registered in a state most people couldn't find on a map. Somewhere inside that structure, a banker sees the cash, but never sees the trust. A lawyer sees the trust, but never sees the daily spending. A bookkeeper reconciles the numbers, but never sees the total. No single person, not even the people closest to him, ever sees the whole picture at once. That is not paranoia. That is architecture, and it gets built in 5 deliberate stages, each one quieter than the last. Level 1 is opting out of the scoreboard everyone else is still playing. Most working professionals spend their 20s and 30s broadcasting progress, the promotion, the new car, the vacation photos, because visibility used to be the only proof that you'd made it. Level 1 wealth walks away from that game entirely, and it usually looks like nothing is happening at all. The car keeps getting driven for a decade, past the point it's paid off. The house stays the starter house, long after the mortgage is a rounding error. Coworkers assume he's coasting. Family assumes he's fine, just not particularly ambitious. Not because the money isn't there, but because every dollar not spent proving something to somebody else is a dollar left free to compound in silence, year after year, completely unnoticed. The people who reach level 1 aren't hiding poverty. They're hiding progress, on purpose, while it's still happening in front of everyone. Level 2 is putting your name on almost nothing. Once real assets start accumulating, property, vehicles, business interests, they stop being titled to a person and start being titled to entities instead. An LLC buys the rental property. A holding company owns the LLC. A second holding company, in a different state, owns the first one. The individual's actual name appears on almost nothing a stranger, a lawsuit, or a curious acquaintance could ever search and find. This has nothing to do with dodging taxes, and everything to do with making sure a public record search comes back boring. At level 2, someone can be worth 8 figures and still show up in a title search owning nothing more interesting than a used sedan and a paid-off starter home, exactly the way he wants it to look. Level 3 is the trust, and this is where the architecture starts getting serious. Assets move out of any individual's name entirely and into a structure that legally owns itself, managed by a trustee, for the benefit of the person who built it. On paper, he does not own the $40 million portfolio. The trust does. He simply benefits from it, quarter after quarter, without his name ever touching the paperwork. That single move accomplishes 2 things at once. It puts a permanent legal wall between his name and his assets, and it quietly starts the process of moving that wealth to the next generation, without a probate court, a public will, or a single courthouse filing ever having to touch it. Most people only encounter a trust once, reading about a stranger's estate in a news article. For him, it is simply the account everything else eventually flows into, the resting place the first 2 levels were built to feed. Level 4 is what people inside these structures sometimes call the second self. A holding company, often registered in whichever state has the strictest privacy laws, becomes the entity that actually operates in the world. It signs the contracts, it owns the subsidiaries, It hires the people, negotiates the leases, and appears on every document that matters. The person behind it becomes, functionally, an employee of his own invisible empire, drawing a modest, easily explainable salary, while the real value compounds 2 or 3 corporate layers away from his own name. Even close friends who know he does well have no real path to the actual number, because the number was never attached to him in the first place. It belongs to the second self instead. Level 5 is the one almost nobody reaches, because it costs something most people are not willing to pay. Total compartmentalization, even from the people standing closest to him. The banker managing the cash accounts has never seen the trust documents. The attorney who drafted the trust has never seen the day-to-day spending. The bookkeeper, reconciling monthly statements, has never seen the consolidated net worth. Each professional holds exactly one piece of a puzzle only he can see completed. Nobody holds the whole picture, including some of the people who would swear, with total confidence, that they know him best. That last level comes with a real cost, and it is worth sitting with before anyone chases this on purpose. When his sister needed help covering a medical bill, he wrote a check from a modest personal account, the only account she has ever known existed. She never learned there were dozens more sitting a few legal layers away. The same structure built to protect him from lawsuits, from bad actors, from a litigious world, also quietly protects him from the people who love him. Total invisibility does not just hide wealth from strangers. It hides it from family, and every dollar tucked one layer deeper is a dollar that requires a little more distance to stay hidden. The structure that was supposed to serve him starts making decisions for him instead, because a trustee, not a brother or a sister, is now the one who technically decides what gets released and when and how and to whom. There is also a quieter risk baked into all 5 levels, one that rarely gets mentioned. The more compartmentalized a fortune becomes, the more it depends on people who are not the person who built it, a trustee who mismanages, an attorney who retires without a clean handoff, a holding company structure nobody fully understands anymore, 10 years and 3 jurisdictions later, with paperwork only one aging accountant ever fully mapped. Invisibility solves one problem, being seen, while quietly creating another one nobody budgets for, which is losing the ability to fully control what you built in the first place. The irony sits right at the center of the whole system. The more thoroughly he disappears from his own paperwork, the more he has to trust other people to remember, correctly, that it was ever his to begin with. So why do people still choose it? Because the alternative, visible wealth, comes with a different and in many ways heavier price. Visible wealth invites lawsuits looking for a payout. It invites requests from every direction, some genuine, some not. It invites a version of yourself performed for an audience instead of lived for its own sake. The 5 levels are not about greed or secrecy for its own sake. They are a trade, plain and simple. Privacy and protection, purchased with distance, even from the people who matter most. 5 levels, in order. Opting out of the scoreboard everyone else is still playing. Putting your name on almost nothing. Moving what you own into a trust that legally owns itself. Operating through a second self that does the visible work for you. And finally, total compartmentalization, where no single person, professional or family, ever sees the whole picture. Most fortunes stall out at level 1 or 2. The ones that make it all 5 levels are the ones nobody ever writes an article about, because the entire system is built so that no one ever finds the thread to pull. Most people will never build anything close to $500 million. But the first level, opting out of the scoreboard, quietly living below what you could technically afford, costs nothing and starts today. The other 4 levels are what happen when that habit compounds for 20 years without an audience watching. Nobody claps for the car you didn't buy. Nobody likes the house you didn't upgrade. That is exactly why it works. The version of wealth nobody can see is, very often, the only version that lasts. If level 1 already sounds like something you could start this week, the car you keep driving, the house you don't upgrade, hit like, because that's the entire first move. Comment which level you think you could actually reach. Opting out, disappearing on paper, or all the way to total compartmentalization. Share this with the one person you know who's still chasing the visible version, The promotion post, the bigger house, the badge everyone's supposed to notice, because the quiet version might be the one that actually works for them. And subscribe, because every video here breaks down another structure people with real money actually use. The kind that never makes it into a personal finance article. Nobody has to see it for it to be real. The fortune nobody can find is, very often, the only one still standing 20 years from now.